Right, let's talk about something that most property experts won't tell you straight. There are 10 UK postcodes where property values are never going to recover, and I mean never, not in your lifetime, not in your children's lifetime either. We're not talking about areas that might dip for a few years and then bounce back when the market picks up. No, these are places where the factors destroying property values are permanent and, frankly, irreversible. Now, I know that sounds quite dramatic, but stick with me here because this is genuinely important. We're looking at structural decline that simply cannot be fixed, economic devastation that cannot be reversed, and in some cases, environmental catastrophe that cannot be stopped. And here's the thing that should really worry you if you own property in one of these postcodes. Your property is not an investment that's going to recover. It's actually a depreciating liability that will continue losing value until eventually it's worth almost nothing. There are tens of thousands of homeowners sat in properties right now in these very areas, believing their investment will bounce back. They're not realising they're watching their life savings evaporate in slow motion. That's a harsh thing to say, but it's the truth. Now, this isn't about temporary market weakness. Every area experiences cyclical price falls. That's completely normal. What we're talking about here is permanent structural factors that guarantee prices will never return to their previous peaks. We're talking about coastal erosion that will literally put properties underwater within decades. Deindustrialisation so complete that there's simply no economic base left to support property values. Population collapse so severe that there are actually more properties than people wanting to live there. Environmental contamination making areas functionally uninhabitable. These are irreversible trends, and properties in these postcodes peaked years ago. They will trend towards zero over the next 30 to 50 years. So by the end of this video, you're going to see exactly which 10 postcodes face permanent value destruction, what specific factors are killing property values in each area, why these factors cannot be reversed, and what this means if you own property in these areas. Because understanding that some properties will never recover value is what separates people who cut their losses and escape with something from people who hold on out of misplaced hope and lose absolutely everything. Right, let's start with our first postcode, DN40, which covers Withernsea and the coastal Holderness area in East Yorkshire. Now, this isn't about property market weakness. This is literal physical destruction happening right before people's eyes. The Holderness coastline is eroding at the fastest rate in all of Europe. We're talking 2 metres per year on average, with some sections losing 4 metres every single year. The cliffs are made of soft boulder clay, and every storm takes another chunk. Every winter takes more land. Properties that were 100 metres from the cliff edge 20 years ago are now just 10 metres from the edge. They're going to fall into the sea within 5 years. Dozens of homes have already been demolished or have literally fallen into the ocean. Coastal villages that existed for centuries are disappearing. Roads that led to these villages now end abruptly at the cliff edge, leading to absolutely nothing. Property values obviously reflect this reality. A house that sold for £120,000 in 2005 now sells for £40,000, if it sells at all. Not because the house is in worse condition, but because the house will cease to exist within a measurable time frame. Anyone buying a property 50 metres from the cliff edge knows they might get 10 to 15 years before the property becomes unsellable, then maybe 5 more years before it actually falls, 20 years maximum before their investment literally falls into the sea. Banks won't mortgage these properties. You cannot get insurance. If you own one, you cannot sell to a normal buyer, because that buyer cannot get finance. The only people buying are cash buyers willing to gamble on how many years remain. The local authority cannot stop the erosion. The cost of coastal defences is between £50,000 and £100,000 per linear metre. Protecting the entire Holderness coast would cost billions, and that money simply doesn't exist. The European Union funding that previously paid for coastal defences is gone post-Brexit. Properties are being sacrificed. Managed retreat is the official policy. Let the coast erode, compensate some homeowners, abandon the rest. Our second postcode is FY4, Blackpool South Shore. This is deindustrialisation and tourism collapse combined with social decay, creating what I can only describe as a death spiral. Blackpool was the premier British seaside resort in the post-war era. millions visited annually. Hotels and guest houses were profitable businesses. Property values reflected this, with a 3-bedroom guest house selling for the equivalent of £300,000 in today's money at its peak. Then cheap flights to Spain emerged. British holidaymakers abandoned Blackpool for the Mediterranean. Tourism collapsed, hotels closed, and guest houses were converted to houses of multiple occupation. The local economy imploded, jobs disappeared, unemployment soared, anyone with skills or options left. The population that remained was increasingly elderly, unemployed, or transient. Property values collapsed. Hotels worth $300,000 in the 70s sold for $30,000 in the 2000s. Now many cannot sell at any price. Blackpool South Shore now has some of the worst deprivation indicators in England. Life expectancy is among the lowest in the country. Health outcomes are terrible. Educational attainment is in the bottom decile nationally. Crime rates are high, antisocial behaviour is endemic, streets are run down, shops are boarded up, and there's visible decay everywhere. A 3-bedroom terraced house in South Shore sells for £40,000 to £60,000. Sounds cheap, but you genuinely cannot live there if you have any alternative. Schools are failing, crime is constant, neighbours are transient benefit claimants or elderly people trapped there. No jobs, no prospects. Anyone who can leave does leave. The third postcode is SA43, covering Ammanford and the Amman Valley in Carmarthenshire, Wales. This is a coal mining area where the mines closed in the 1980s and 1990s. The economic base was entirely mining. When the mines closed, the economy collapsed. Unemployment soared and population declined as workers moved away. 40 years later, the area has not recovered and it will not recover. No alternative industries emerged. The location is poor with remote valleys and poor transport links. There's no motorway access and it's over an hour from any major city. There's simply no reason for businesses to locate there. Attempts to attract employers have failed repeatedly. Enterprise zones were established, tax incentives were offered, but it made no difference. Geography and remoteness are insurmountable obstacles. The population is ageing and shrinking. Young people leave for university and don't return because there are no jobs for graduates. The population remaining is elderly former miners and low-skilled service workers. The median age is increasing, deaths exceed births, and the population is declining 1 to 2% annually. This is a depopulation death spiral. A 3-bedroom terraced house sells for £60,000 to £80,000. Semi-detached properties go for £90,000 to £110,000. These prices haven't increased in 20 years. Adjusted for inflation, they've fallen 50% and they will continue falling. The fourth postcode is TS24, covering Blackhall and Easington in County Durham. Another former coal mining area, but with an additional factor, the coastal location provides no benefit whatsoever. Mines closed, economy collapsed, population declined. It's the standard post-industrial story, but the coastal location means erosion is also a problem. You've got the worst of both situations. Former mining communities on the coast facing permanent economic decline, plus the physical threat from sea level rise and erosion. Properties are losing value from both factors simultaneously. Economic decline means no jobs and falling demand. Coastal risk means properties are becoming uninsurable and unmortgageable. A 3-bedroom terraced house sells for £50,000 to £70,000. Prices have been flat or falling for 20 years and will continue falling because both economic decline and coastal risk are worsening. The fifth postcode is L8, Liverpool Toxteth. This is inner city social deprivation and managed decline. The Toxteth riots in 1981 symbolised the area's problems. 40 plus years later, it remains deprived. Unemployment is high, poverty is extreme, and crime rates are among the highest in England. Educational outcomes are terrible. Multiple regeneration schemes have been attempted. Millions have been spent, but they've made minimal difference. The problems are too deep, with generational worklessness, drug abuse and gang activity. These cannot be fixed with cosmetic improvements to the housing stock. Property values are low. Terraced houses sell for £40,000 to £70,000 depending on the specific street. Some streets are okay, other streets are no-go areas even for police. Buyers need to know exactly which streets to avoid. There can be price variations of £30,000 between streets just 50 metres apart, based purely on crime levels. Liverpool is a growing city overall, with the city centre regenerating successfully, but Toxteth is not benefiting. Wealth and investment are going to the waterfront and city centre. Inner areas like Toxteth are being left behind, and this will continue. The sixth postcode is ME4 Chatham in Kent. This one is different. It's not remote or post-industrial, but it's suffering from overdevelopment and infrastructure failure. Chatham and the wider Medway towns have been massively overdeveloped. Tens of thousands of new homes have been built in the last 20 years, but infrastructure has not kept pace. Roads are gridlocked, schools are oversubscribed, GP surgeries aren't accepting new patients, and the train line to London is overcrowded. This overdevelopment has created a supply glut, too many properties for local demand. Prices fell because supply exceeded demand. Many new flats in Chatham town centre are now unsellable. People bought off plan for £200,000 and now they're worth £140,000. Owners are in massive negative equity. This won't recover because overdevelopment is continuing. More developments have been approved and are under construction. Supply keeps increasing whilst infrastructure problems are getting worse, not better. There's no funding for major infrastructure improvements. The area is getting less attractive as it gets more crowded. The seventh postcode is HU5 West Hull. This is post-industrial decline combined with poor location and contamination. Hull's economy was built on fishing and shipping, and both have declined. The fishing industry collapsed, shipping moved elsewhere, and the manufacturing that replaced them has also declined. The remaining economy is low-wage services and logistics. West Hull is the poorest part of the city, social housing estates with extreme deprivation, high unemployment, low educational attainment, high crime, drug problems, and antisocial behaviour. The reputation is terrible, and anyone with options avoids the area. Terraced houses sell for £40,000 to £60,000. Some streets go even lower. Properties have been sold at auction for £20,000 to £30,000. These are functional houses, not derelict, just in an area where nobody wants to live. There's an additional factor of industrial contamination. Parts of West Hull were built on former industrial land. There's ground contamination present, not at levels making it dangerous to live there, but enough to make it difficult to get mortgages or insurance. The stigma of contamination depresses values further. The eighth postcode covers NE 61 to 63, the Newcastle outer suburbs and former mining villages. These are areas beyond Newcastle proper, former mining villages and outer estates that became dormitory suburbs. Mines closed and the areas became purely residential with no local employment. Residents commute to Newcastle or regional centres for work. These areas are now declining because Newcastle itself is struggling. City employment is stagnant, commuting costs are high with fuel prices, and people are questioning why they should live in a remote suburb and commute when they could live closer to the city. Demand for outer areas is falling. A 3-bedroom semi-detached sells for £120,000 to £140,000. These prices are flat for 15 years. In real terms, they've fallen 30 to 40% and will continue falling because demand is falling. The remote location is becoming a liability, not an asset. The ninth postcode is SA 62 to 63, covering the West Wales coast around Fishguard and Pembrokeshire. This is different. It's an attractive coastal location, but it's suffering from the second home crisis combined with local economic weakness. These areas became dominated by second homes and holiday lets. Locals were priced out. The working age population declined. Schools closed, shops closed, and communities were hollowed out. Now the second home market itself is weakening. Energy costs make second homes expensive to maintain. Inheritance tax planning changes have reduced their appeal. Occupancy rates for holiday lets are falling as the cost of living crisis reduces domestic tourism. Second homeowners are facing expenses with reduced utility. Some are selling up, but local demand is minimal because there are no jobs. The economy is tourism only, and tourism is 6 months per year. Young people cannot build careers on seasonal work, so they leave. A cottage that sold for £300,000 to a second home buyer in 2020 is now selling for £250,000. Buyers are scarce and properties are sitting unsold for over a year. The 10th and final postcode is DH9, Stanley in County Durham. This is a former mining town that declined after pit closures and has continued declining for 40 years. Every regeneration attempt has failed. A massive retail park was built to create jobs, but half the units are empty. A business park was created with tax incentives, and it's mostly empty. Nothing works. The population is declining, services are closing, and the town centre has a 50% vacancy rate. It looks genuinely post-apocalyptic. Those remaining are elderly or unemployed. Anyone with prospects leaves. A 3-bedroom terraced house sells for £40,000 to £60,000. Semi-detached properties go for £70,000 to £90,000. These prices are below 1980s levels, even in nominal terms. In real terms, they've collapsed. Why is this permanent? Because 40 years of attempted regeneration have all failed. Clearly, something is fundamentally wrong with the location and economic base. It's too far from major cities to become a commuter town, there are no transport links worth mentioning, and there's no reason for businesses to locate there. Geography is destiny, and geography here is permanently unfavourable. Now, the common factors across these 10 postcodes are really instructive. We've got coastal erosion that cannot be stopped without spending, that will never happen. Post-industrial decline in areas where no alternative economic base has emerged, and if it hasn't in 40+ years, it's proving it never will. Overdevelopment creating permanent supply gluts, location disadvantages that simply cannot be overcome. The second home crisis destroying communities, then the second home market itself weakening, and social decay death spirals that reinforce themselves. These are not temporary cyclical problems. These are permanent structural features. Properties in these areas have passed their peak. Values will continue falling towards an equilibrium that reflects their fundamental disadvantages, and that equilibrium is much lower than current prices in most cases. For people who own properties in these postcodes, the advice is brutal but necessary. Sell now if you can. Any price you can get now is better than the price you'll get in 5 or 10 years. Values are falling. This is not temporary. You are not waiting for recovery. There is no recovery coming. Cut your losses and get out. I know that's painful to hear. You bought a property believing it was an investment that would hold value or appreciate. You might be in negative equity. You might have to sell at a loss. You might lose your deposit and more. But staying makes it worse. Every year you wait is another year of value declining. Losses get larger, not smaller. If you absolutely cannot sell, maybe you can't clear the mortgage, or you have no alternative housing, then stay and treat it as pure consumption, not investment. You have a roof over your head, and that has value. But don't fool yourself that the property will recover value. It won't. Plan your finances accordingly. Don't count on property value for retirement. It's a liability, not an asset. For people thinking of buying in these areas because prices are cheap, understand what you're buying. You're buying in a terminal decline area. The property might decline further and might become unsellable. You could get trapped. Only buy if you're committed to living there for decades and genuinely don't care about value. Don't buy as an investment. Don't buy expecting to sell and make a profit. That's delusion. For the property market generally, these 10 postcodes are extreme examples of a broader trend. Many areas face structural headwinds that will prevent recovery to previous peaks. Coastal erosion affects dozens of communities beyond Holderness. Post-industrial decline affects large swathes of the North and Wales. Overdevelopment affects many towns in the South East and Midlands. The second home crisis affects coastal and rural areas across Wales and the South West. Understanding that some properties will never recover helps with realistic market analysis. Not all falls are temporary. Some are permanent. Some areas have passed their peak forever. Recognizing this prevents holding on in false hope of a recovery that will never come. So there you have it, the 10 UK postcodes where property values will never recover. DN40 Withernsea facing literal coastal erosion. FY4 Blackpool South Shore in a social decay death spiral. SA43 Amman Valley with no alternative economic base. TS24 Blackhall and Easington facing economic decline plus erosion. L8 Liverpool Toxteth resistant to regeneration. ME4 Chatham overdeveloped with infrastructure failure. HU5 West Hull post-industrial with contamination issues. NE 61 to 63 Newcastle outer areas becoming remote liabilities, SA 62 to 63 West Wales with the second home market weakening, and DH9 Stanley with 40 years of failed regeneration proving terminal decline. If you found this video helpful, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe for more honest property analysis. Drop a comment below if you own property in